Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Roberto Solon. I am the sales manager with Hayward for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I'm going to be conducting this webinar today on commercial controls and sanitization. This is going to include a general overview, some of the features of the products that we are promoting during this webinar, and some installation tips that you should take into account whenever you're going to offer one of these to your customers. So we're going to be focusing on the CAT 6000 and the CAT 2000. So in the CAT 2000, we have the flow cell, and the flow cell, we have the two sensors, the pH and the ORP, and we are going to be setting our reading directly into this controller. Remember to keep in mind for the installation, this is what I wanted to show you here, the graph on the installation. So we have our pump, we have our filter, and then we have our feeder, erosion feeder in this case. So that erosion feeder is going to make it easier. It's going to, in this case, in this example, we're using a tablet erosion feeder, but then we have the controller. The controller, the water, the fresh water comes after the filter, and this is how it works. We tap into the return line, and that return line comes into our flow cells. And then the flow cell, we feed that water into the pH and to the ORP sensor, and then coming out of the flow cell, then we're going to tap back into the suction line. So keep that in mind because we are going to be circulating the water after the filter. It's always going to be coming fresh water into our flow cells, and then coming out of the flow cells is going to be into the suction line. And then whenever the system needs an ORP feed, or in this case, the ORP, remember, is the chlorine. So whenever the system detects through the sensors that the chlorine reading is not right, that we need more sanitizer, it is going to send a signal to this solenoid valve. This solenoid valve is obviously going to open, and now we're going to get water flowing through our erosion feeder and going back into our pool. So that's how we are going to inject more chlorine whenever it is needed. Once the system detects that the ORP level is fine, it is going to just close this solenoid valve. By closing the solenoid valve, now we stop the feeding of chlorine into our swimming pool. As a second option, if we are not going to be using an erosion feeder, but we have a tank, for example, with cal hypo or liquid chlorine, then instead of using a solenoid valve, we are going to use a chemical pump, a dosing pump. And this pump, it is just going to open and close, or it's going to start pumping whenever the system calls for it. So now the signal, instead of going to the solenoid, is going to go back into the chemical pump, into the dosing pump, and it is going to start feeding chlorine into our swimming pool. Once the system detects that, okay, our ORP reading is correct, then it's going to shut off the dosing pump or the chemical pump. So keep that in mind because all of this process obviously is going to be fully automated. The same with the pH. There's also a line coming out of the system for the pH. In this case, in this example, we can use a chemical pump as well to feed acid or base. Remember that depending on the type of chlorine that we use, if we use, for example, constantly trichlor is acidic, so we are going to have to feed base. If we have a salt chlorinator to where the pH normally increases, then we are going to be feeding, it can be muriatic acid, sulfuric acid, some type of acid that we're going to have in our markets in order to bring down the pH level. And then whenever the tech has to do any type of service, or whenever the tech goes in and they have to measure the water parameters, they can just take a water sample directly from this valve here in the center. So they just open the valve when the system is running, and they take a water sample directly from here. That way they can ensure that the water sample that they are taking is directly from the sensors. It's the same water that is coming into our sensors. And that way they can compare it to the readings in the automation, and they can adjust it, they can calibrate it if they need it. Here we can see that on our boards, on our systems, we can use different types of relays. If we are going to use a salt chlorine generator, in that case, we are going to use a solid contact, and that can be wired directly into our boards. Here is how the CAT 2000 looks. We can increase our pH levels. We are going to have alarms as well. It is going to give us an indication whenever it is actually feeding acid or base into our pool in order to adjust the pH, and the same with the ORP side. If the feed on the ORP hasn't been, if it is feeding and for whatever reason it is not adjusting the ORP, it is noting no change, then it is going to give you an alarm. And that can be, for example, if we are using a tank with chlorine in order to adjust our ORP, and it has been feeding for an hour and it doesn't see a change on the ORP, then it is going to give you an alarm. And in that case, it can be, for example, that the tank is empty. So we have run out of chlorine. And then the pH feed can also be, obviously we want to keep it automatic, but if for whatever reason the sensor has been broken and we want to be able to keep the pool running, then we can also set it as a pH feed into a manual. And the same with the ORP. We are only going to do that if for whatever reason the sensors have been damaged while we wait for a new sensor to come in, then we can set it for a manual feed. And now our newest unit, which is the CAT 6000. CAT 6000 has all of the features that we saw before, but it also has some other benefits. For example, it installs directly into Wi-Fi, so now the customers can see and can control the unit remotely. It also has built-in software updates to where the other doesn't have that ability. And then the reading that is going to give us, it is going to give us pH, it is going to give us ORP, and it is also going to give us a free chlorine reading in parts per million. So again, this is a benefit in case that our customers are not familiar with reading pH and they actually prefer to see a free chlorine reading. Then with this CAT 6000, we can get both the ORP and the free chlorine reading. And it is also going to give us a TDS reading and temperature. So here we see the components in this system. It has more sensors. It has the pH and ORP sensor that we saw before, but it also has what we call solid state sensors. And these are these two sensors here in the middle, and those are the chlorine sensors. Those are the sensors that are giving us the parts per million of chlorine. Also on the flow cell, we also have a flow switch, obviously, because we don't want the system to be feeding without any flow. And installation is very simple because this board just attaches directly into our equipment room. It comes with a guide where we are going to attach the plate and then just mount the system into that plate. And then here we see a look more closely into the sensors, how they look. They all come pre-wired into the system, but everything is very easy to wire as well because it has all of the connections that are actually labeled for all of these sensors. And here we are going to see an example of how we can use any of these controllers with salt chlorinators. In this case, remember again, we are taking our sample after the filter, and then we are going to return before the pump. But in this case, we are using a tank in order to inject muriatic acid or inject sulfuric acid into our pool in order to keep our pH level balanced. But then instead of going with a valve or a chlorine feeder, we are going to be using salt chlorine generators. And we can see here through coming out of one outlet how we can power actually multiple cells in case that we have a very large pool and we need more than one system. Then the unit it doesn't have to work just with one. If we have more than one salt chlorine generator, we can also control it through any of these systems. And then we can see here that this system is also going to give us the alarms. It is going to give us a status indicator. And then whenever it is feeding acid or whenever it is feeding for the ORP, it is also going to give us an alert on that. And here we can see the Wi-Fi icon because remember that this unit has Wi-Fi built in. So it is connected. We can just connect it to the Wi-Fi on the job site. And then through logging in through an app that I'm going to show you a little bit later, we are going to be able to see how we can go in and actually see all of the readings for the chlorinator. And here we can see that we can set our pH, we can calibrate our pH, we can tell it whether or not we are using stabilizer or cyanuric acid, we can see our ORP or free chlorine readings. And if for whatever reason we get an alarm, for example, it is going to show us, in this case, the pH is higher than the recommended, and it is going to give us an alarm. It is going to show the pH in red, and at the same time, it is going to give us an alarm button. Once we go into that, then it is going to tell us the reason why that alarm is there. In this case, for example, it can be that it has been trying to feed acid in order to adjust the pH, and after it does that for a long time and it doesn't see a change in the pH, then it is going to say you an alarm. And at the same time, since it is connected to Wi-Fi, then that alarm can also be sent through text message or through email. So that is a benefit as well, because now the tech or the service guys can react much more faster and see why are we getting that alarm. Probably either the pH feed pump is broken, or the tank is empty, or a hose might be broken. And this way, now we don't have to wait until the next service. By getting that alarm, we can react much faster. And here we can see all of the parameters that we can adjust with this CAT 6000. We can set our pH, we can set our free chlorine, we can set the chlorine's set point. So if we want the free chlorine to be 3 parts per million, we can go anywhere between 0 to 5 parts per million of free chlorine. We can set our, we can see our TDS levels. We can do alkalinity and calcium as well. So all of these are things that we can just program on the unit, and that is going to help us get an accurate reading on our ORP as well. And then remember all of the configuration for the alarms. And then another unit, we have two different types of units when it comes to automatic automation for commercial pools. We have the CAT, and then we have the HCC. The HCC is a Hayward branded unit. It is more basic than the one that we just saw for the CAT 6000, but we can see here that the HCC 2000 is a great unit for entry-level pools, or a customer that doesn't want to spend a lot of money, but they still want to get the benefits of automation. We can easily do it with the HCC 2000. This one has all of the benefits of the CAT 2000 that we saw previously, but it doesn't have Wi-Fi connectivity. If the customer wants to be able to access it remotely, or for example, they are on a resort complex and they have multiple pools, and they want to be able to see all of those pools and manage them from a central office, then in that case, I recommend that you go with the HCC 4000. This HCC 4000, it has Wi-Fi connectivity, so it is going to give us all of the benefits, and it is going to keep internal readings for up to 10 days. So it is going to not only give you, okay, what is the readings right now, but you can go back up to 10 days and see how the water has been keeping up. And all of those units that have connectivity, we connect through it to the through the poolcom. Once we log into that poolcom, we can see that we can have multiple units into one account. So again, it is perfect for those service techs, or for the resorts, for example, that have multiple pools on their location. They can have the kids pool, they can have the adults pool, they can have a spa as well, and all of them be able to control it through a central location, get alarms for all of them individually. That way they can react to the pool before it becomes a problem. And in this case, we can see as well the pH readings, all of the date and time. Every hour is taking a pH reading in this case. And then we can also see it on the graph like we saw previously. And it is going to give us any indication of if our pH or the ORP has been out of range. And then we can also get all of these alarms via email. So keep that in mind, because that is a great benefit. For example, in this case, we had a high pH of 8.3, and we got an alarm via email. So that is great, because now we don't have to be waiting again for a tech to visit before these problems are noticed. So some of the benefits by having a connected system: first of all, we have the data storage, we have the graph, we have no phone line is required, because remember that these units are going to connect via Wi-Fi. But the biggest benefit, I think, is having a central location to where you can manage multiple pools. And for example, if you are a service tech and you have multiple pools under your command, now you can offer them one of these systems, and you can be proactive when dealing with your customers. instead of having to be reactive. Oh, my pool turned green, my pool is out of balance. And in this case, you can be proactive and have a better sanitized pool. And now we're going to take a quick look into our salt chlorine generators. We're going to be taking a look at our Saline series. We have two different sizes on that. We have the Saline 6.0, and this one produces 6 pounds of chlorine per day. So this is a great benefit because once we tied a commercial automation, the ones that we just saw, with one of these saline controllers, now the saline is only going to be producing chlorine when the system needs it, when the pool demands chlorine. This is a great unit because it comes with just with a single cell. Now you're going to be producing 6 pounds per day instead of having to do multiple residential cells to where the customer, it is more complicated because they have to be managing multiple systems. In this case, just with one unit is going to do the job of what you will have to do with 4 of the residential units. It is going to take less space, and at the same time, the cell is on a clear vessel, so we can just see whenever it is time to do service. We can just open it up, take the cell out, and do whatever cleaning is needed without having to open it without any need. And then we also have the Saline 11. It has the same benefits that we just saw before with the Saline 6.0, but this one is going to give us 11 pounds of chlorine per day. So keep that in mind because obviously if we have a larger commercial pools over 100,000 gallons, then we can offer one of these systems. And this one, the great benefit that this one has is that the cells actually comes with 4-inch unions. So now that is going to be a lot easier to install. It is going to create less restriction on our swimming pool. It also has a transparent housing for the cell. And since it has 4-inch unions, now we can work with flow capacities of 250 gallons per minute. And we can see that it has an LCD screen. We can adjust the production in case that we don't have a controller. If we have a controller, then we just let the controller adjust the production whenever it needs, because the controller in that case is going to be turning on and on the unit whenever it requires any chlorination. And here we can see again some of the examples. In this case, we are going to have a flow sensor that has to be installed in order for the salt cell to work. And here we can see the plumbing. We have the controller. We have the green line, which is going to be controlling our acid pump. And then we have the blue line, which is going to be controlling our chlorinator. So whenever the unit needs chlorination, it's going to turn it on and off. And if not, it is going to be much better managed because remember, through the ORP, we're going to be managing when the chlorinator actually works. And here we can see the example again of multiple units. If we have a pool that requires more than one salt chlorinator, we can do it. Keep in mind that we're always going to do that in parallel. We are going to be feeding all of the cells at the same time, and then we're going to be coming out of these cells at the same time. We don't want to go from one cell to the other and then to the other, because doing it that way, it is not going to increase our chlorine production. And keep in mind that for these units to work, we require a minimum of 40 gallons per minute. And at that 40 gallons per minute, we can see here that we're going to be producing about 5 pounds of chlorine per day. And if we have our salinity is higher, then we are going to be producing the 6 pounds of chlorine per day. So keep in mind that if we're installing it on a bypass and the bypass is too open to where not enough flow is going through the cells, that is going to affect our chlorine production. And here we see the flow sensor that connects directly to the power center. And then we have our power cords. Remember that these units are going to connect into 120 volts. And then we have the blue cord here, which that one is the one that is going to connect into our automation system, to our CAT or our HCC system in case that we need it. And then we can also complement our sanitization with a UV system. Remember, the benefits of UV is that it kills bacteria that many times chlorine doesn't kill, or unless the chlorine reading is extremely high. So we have our UV system, which is available up to 3 lamps, and with 3 lamps, it is going to maximum flow is about 120 gallons per minute. Remember that this is a unit that is designed, it can also be installed outside. It is totally corrosion resistant. And the benefits of having UV is that it's going to kill Cryptosporidium, Giardia, and all of these bacteria that a 3 parts per million of free chlorine is not going to kill by itself. So keep that in mind, because, for example, if we have a spa to where we have a low volume of water and high usage, then obviously the amount of sanitization that we need, it is going to be higher. Now, by installing a UV, it can be installed in conjunction with a salt chlorinator. Then that is also going to help reduce our chemical use, but at the same time, it is going to kill all of that bacteria that the chlorine doesn't kill at just 3 parts per million. And remember that we do not recommend, and you cannot use UV as a primary sanitization method. It is always as a secondary. It is a support to a chlorinator, for example, because it doesn't leave any residual in the water. So you're always going to need some sort of residual of chlorine in order to have that water protected when there's no flow. So again, inactivates 99.9% of all of that crypto, Giardia. It is easier to maintain. And then its effectiveness is not influenced by weather, so that is a good thing, but obviously it is not going to leave that residual, and that's why we need the salt chlorine generator or some sort of chlorine in order to keep in the pool. And here we can see an example when installing one of our UV systems. It can be plumbed directly, or if you have a higher flow above 120 gallons per minute, then you can do a bypass. And remember that we have multiple inlets and outlets on this unit. So when we are going to be installing it, for example, at 120 gallons per minute, we can see here on the bottom that we have 4 ports, 4 connection ports all around the housing. So keep in mind, for example, we have a connection port here on the left, we have one here in the front, we have another one here on the right, and then we have one that is on the back side. For us to work with flows of 120 gallons per minute, and we have 2.5-inch or 3-inch plumbing, we cannot just plumb it into one port. In that case, we are going to do a manifold, and we are just going to tee and come into one side, and then also come into another port. And that is going to ensure that we can work with higher flows, because remember, the connections are 2-inch, but we are able to sanitize up to 120 gallons per minute. So on the inlet, we are going to be coming through 2 ports at the same time, and the same on the outlet. On the top as well, we have a port here, port on the right, port on the left, and a port on the back side. So whenever we're working with over 90 gallons per minute, then we recommend using 2 ports in order to get a better flow. And that has been an overview of our commercial automation and sanitization. Remember the controllers that we discussed, the CAT 2000 and the CAT 6000 with Wi-Fi connectivity. Then we also have the line of HCC 2000 and the HCC 4000 also with Wi-Fi connectivity. Remember that all of these units, they can work with dosing pumps, as we can see here on the left. So in this case, we can have a dosing pump for chlorine, another dosing pump for acid, or we can have just one dosing pump for acid, and the chlorine, we can do it with one of our salt chlorine generators. Also keep in mind the UV is a great disinfectant, it's a great sanitizer as a backup sanitizer for our commercial projects. Remember that tomorrow we are going to be doing our OmniLogic programming. So keep that in mind. If you haven't registered, please register for one of these sessions. And also remember to visit hayward-webinar.com in order to see some of the previous recordings that you might have missed. If you have any questions, please write it down under the question section of this platform, and we can answer them now. And if not, you can just get in touch with us directly. Here's my contact email. And here's also our tech, Manny Ixlawak. He's the technical manager for Latin America and the Caribbean. And you can get in touch with us if you have any questions in the future. That's it for us during this webinar. We appreciate your time. Sorry for the technical hiccup that we had there initially to where it wasn't showing the screen, but we were able to see all of the products at the end. So I appreciate your patience and thanks for joining us during this webinar. Have a great day and see you tomorrow, hopefully.